The early morning mist hung over Jefferson Park like a thin blanket as 10-year-old Amara Davis walked beside her mother, Grace, on their way to the bus stop. Amara clutched her lunch bag tightly, knowing it contained the turkey sandwich her mother had made with the last of their weekly groceries. Grace worked 3 jobs just to keep their small apartment, and every penny counted in their household. They had learned to stretch everything, to make do with less, to find joy in simple moments together. But what would happen in the next few minutes would change their lives forever, setting in motion events that would shake their entire community to its core. The story that would unfold from this foggy morning would later be remembered as Black Girl gives sandwich to millionaire dressed as homeless man next day. Police show up, though right now, it was simply another Thursday morning in their struggle to survive and thrive despite the odds stacked against them. Amara spotted him first, an elderly man sitting on the cold metal bench near the playground. His coat was torn in several places, held together with safety pins that caught the morning light. His shoes had holes that revealed worn socks underneath, and his hands shook slightly as he held a piece of cardboard that read, "Lost everything. Anything helps. God bless." The man's eyes were closed, his head tilted back against the bench as if he was trying to catch a moment of peace before the world woke up fully. Amara slowed her steps, her heart pulling her toward the man even as her mind reminded her of all the times her mother had warned her about talking to strangers. But this was different somehow. The man looked so tired, so defeated, that Amara felt tears prick at her eyes. She understood what it was like to be hungry, to wonder where the next meal would come from. There had been nights when she had gone to bed with her stomach growling, pretending to be full so her mother wouldn't skip her own dinner to feed her. Grace noticed her daughter's hesitation and followed her gaze to the man on the bench. She recognized the look in Amara's eyes immediately. It was the same compassionate spirit that made her daughter special, the same generous heart that worried Grace because the world could be so cruel to those who gave freely. "Mama," Amara whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of distant traffic. "That man looks like he hasn't eaten in days. Can I give him my sandwich?" Grace felt her chest tighten. That sandwich was all Amara would have until dinner. And dinner itself would be modest, just rice and beans again. But she looked at her daughter's face, at the genuine concern written there. And she remembered her own mother's words. "We may not have much, but we always have enough to share with someone who has less." Grace nodded slowly, squeezing Amara's hand. "Go ahead, baby. But be careful and come right back." Amara walked toward the bench with determined steps, her pink backpack bouncing with each movement. The man on the bench was actually James Whitfield, though no one in this neighborhood would have recognized him as the billionaire CEO of Whitfield Industries. For the past week, he had been living on the streets as part of a social experiment for a documentary he was funding about income inequality in America. He had wanted to understand firsthand what it felt like to be invisible, to be treated as less than human by society. The experience had been more brutal than he had imagined. People crossed the street to avoid him. Security guards chased him away from storefronts, and teenagers had thrown food at him while laughing and recording videos. He had almost given up on finding any goodness in humanity when he heard soft footsteps approaching. Opening his eyes, he saw a young girl standing before him, her school uniform neat despite being obviously secondhand, her hair styled and beautiful, braids decorated with colorful beads that clicked softly when she moved. "Excuse me, sir," Amara said, her voice gentle but clear. "I noticed you've been sitting here for a while, and you look hungry. I have a sandwich. It's turkey with cheese and lettuce. My mama made it this morning. Would you like it?" She held out the brown paper bag with both hands, like she was offering something precious, which to her it was. James looked up into the child's eyes and saw something he hadn't seen in days. genuine kindness without expectation of anything in return. His throat felt tight with emotion as he accepted the bag with trembling hands that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thank you so much, young lady. This means more than you could possibly know. What's your name?" Amara smiled brightly, showing a gap where she had recently lost a tooth. "I'm Amara Davis, and that's my mama over there. Her name is Grace. We live in the Riverside Apartments. Building B, Mama says. Helping people is what makes us human." James carefully opened the bag and saw not just a sandwich, but also an apple that had been cut into slices, and a small note that said, "Have a blessed day," in a child's careful handwriting. He felt tears well up in his eyes. This family clearly had very little, yet they were sharing what they had with a complete stranger. "Amara, you and your mother are angels. Thank you for seeing me as a person worth helping." Amara beamed at the compliment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a dollar bill. "This is my tooth fairy money from last week. I was saving it for candy, but I think you need it more than I need candy." Before James could protest, she pressed the crumpled bill into his hand and ran back to her mother. As they walked away toward the bus stop, Amara turned back once and waved. James waved back, clutching the sandwich and the dollar bill like they were treasures. What Amara and Grace didn't know was that their act of kindness had been witnessed by several people, including Margaret Henderson, the president of the Riverside Neighborhood Association. Margaret, a woman who believed that poverty was a character flaw and that those people were bringing down property values, had been watching from her luxury SUV. She immediately took photos and videos, which she shared in the neighborhood's private Facebook group with the caption, "This is what happens when we allow low-income housing in our area. Children being taught to interact with dangerous vagrants. This child is clearly unsupervised and at risk." Within an hour, the post had dozens of comments from other wealthy residents, each one more vitriolic than the last. Someone suggested calling Child Protective Services. Another mentioned they had connections at the police department. Margaret smiled coldly as she typed her response. "Don't worry, I'm handling it. That family has been a problem since they moved in. Time to clean up our neighborhood." That evening, Grace was helping Amara with her math homework when she heard aggressive knocking at their door. Her heart sank as she opened it to find two police officers, a social worker, and Margaret Henderson standing in the hallway with several other residents from the wealthy part of the neighborhood. "Ms. Grace Davis?" the lead officer asked, his hand resting on his belt near his weapon. "We've received reports of child endangerment and neglect. We need to speak with you about your daughter's activities this morning." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you talking about? What endangerment?" Margaret stepped forward, her designer heels clicking on the worn linoleum floor. "Your daughter was seen approaching a dangerous homeless man in the park. Without supervision, she gave him food and money. Who knows what could have happened? This is clear neglect, and we have video evidence." The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Patricia Mills, pushed past Grace into the apartment. Her eyes scanned the small space, taking in the second-hand furniture, the water stains on the ceiling, the single bedroom that Grace and Amara shared. She began writing on her clipboard immediately. "How often do you leave your daughter unsupervised, Ms. Davis?" she asked, without looking up. Grace's voice shook with anger and fear. "I was right there with her this morning. She gave a hungry man a sandwich with my permission. Since when is teaching kindness a crime?" Margaret laughed, a harsh sound that made Amara peek out from behind the bedroom door. "Teaching kindness? You're teaching her to put herself in danger. A black child approaching strangers in parks. Do you have any idea how that looks? What kind of mother allows that?" The words hung in the air like poison. There it was, the real issue. This wasn't about safety or concern for Amara. This was about race, about class. About people like Margaret, who couldn't stand the sight of a poor black family in their neighborhood. The officers began asking invasive questions about Grace's work schedule, her income, her parenting choices. They questioned why Amara's clothes were secondhand, why there wasn't more food in the refrigerator, why Grace couldn't afford after-school care. Each question was designed to find fault, to build a case that Grace was an unfit mother. Amara came out of the bedroom, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't take me away from my mama. We didn't do anything wrong." The man was hungry, and Mama always says we should help hungry people. Patricia Mills looked at the crying child and then at her clipboard. "We'll need to open a formal investigation. This could take several months. During that time, any further incidents could result in removal of the child from the home." After they left, Grace held Amara as they both cried. The injustice of it all was overwhelming. They were being punished for showing kindness, targeted because they were poor and black in a neighborhood that didn't want them. "Mama, why are they so mean?" Amara asked through her tears. Grace didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 10-year-old. How could she explain that some people's hearts were so full of hate that they saw kindness as a threat? Unknown. To Grace and Amara, 3 miles away in the penthouse of the city's most expensive hotel, James Whitfield was on the phone with his team of lawyers. He had returned to his normal life after the encounter in the park, but he couldn't stop thinking about the little girl who had given him her sandwich and her tooth fairy money. He had done research on the Davis family, and what he found enraged him. Grace was working 3 jobs to support herself and Amara after Amara's father had died in military service 2 years ago. They received no benefits because of a technicality in paperwork. Despite their struggles, Grace volunteered at a food bank on weekends, and Amara tutored younger children in reading at the library. James called his head attorney, David Chen. "David, I need you to assemble your best team." A child who showed me kindness when I was disguised as a homeless man is now being persecuted by racist neighbors. I want everyone involved to face consequences. David could hear the cold fury in his boss's voice. "Send me everything, Mr. Whitfield. We'll destroy them." James then called his head of security, former FBI agent Maria Rodriguez. "Maria, I need surveillance footage from Jefferson Park from this morning. I also need you to investigate a Margaret Henderson and the Riverside Neighborhood Association. Dig deep. Find everything." As his team got to work, James made one more call to his media contacts. This story was going to make national news, and he would make sure the right version was told. The next morning, Grace woke up to find an envelope that had been slipped under her door. Inside was a business card for David Chen, attorney at law, and a note that said, "Ms. Davis, you have friends you don't know about. Do not speak to anyone about your case without calling me first. My services have been retained on your behalf. At no cost to you, justice is coming. A friend who believes in kindness." Grace was confused, but desperate enough to call the number. David answered immediately. "Ms. Davis, I've been expecting your call. Can you come to my office this morning? Bring Amara. We have much to discuss." Grace was skeptical, but agreed. She didn't have many options. David Chen's office occupied the entire top floor of a downtown skyscraper. Grace and Amara felt out of place in their simple clothes among all the marble and glass. David greeted them warmly, his smile genuine. "Ms. Davis, Amara, please sit down. I have some information to share with you." He opened his laptop and showed them security footage from the park. "This is from yesterday morning, as you can see. It clearly shows Ms. Davis supervising Amara the entire time. It also shows that the man Amara helped was calm, grateful, and posed no threat whatsoever." Grace stared at the screen. "How did you get this?" David smiled. "The man Amara helped yesterday wasn't actually homeless. His name is James Whitfield, and he's one of the wealthiest men in America. Amara gasped. The man with the torn coat. He's rich. David nodded. Very rich. He was conducting research for a documentary about how society treats its most vulnerable members. Amara, you were the only person in a week who treated him with kindness and dignity. He's now determined to protect you and your mother from those who would punish you for your compassion. David showed them more documents on his laptop. We've discovered that Margaret Henderson, and her association have been systematically harassing minority families in your neighborhood. They've filed false reports, bribed officials, and violated numerous civil rights laws. Mr. Whitfield has purchased your entire apartment complex. Margaret and her supporters will be receiving eviction notices today. That afternoon, the neighborhood was in chaos. News vans surrounded the Riverside apartments as Margaret Henderson was arrested on charges of filing false police reports, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Patricia Mills, the social worker, was also arrested for accepting bribes to target specific families. Several police officers were suspended pending investigation. James Whitfield held a press conference in front of the building. He was dressed in his expensive suit, a far cry from the homeless man Amara had helped. When he saw Amara and Grace approaching, his face lit up with a genuine smile. The cameras captured him walking over to them, kneeling down to Amara's level. Amara Davis, he said loud enough for everyone to hear, you reminded me that there is still good in this world. Your kindness when you had so little to give showed me that wealth isn't measured in money, but in the size of our hearts. He stood and addressed Grace. Ms. Davis, you've raised an exceptional daughter despite facing challenges that would break most people. I'm establishing the Amara Davis Foundation for Kindness and Justice. It will provide legal support for families facing discrimination and fund programs that teach empathy and compassion in schools. The crowd gasped when he announced the foundation's initial funding, $100 million. But James wasn't done. He turned to face the cameras directly. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can persecute others based on race or economic status. You will face consequences. Kindness will always triumph over hate, and justice will always find a way. The story went viral within hours. 10-year-old sandwich exposes racist network became the headline on every major news outlet. Margaret Henderson's trial revealed years of coordinated harassment against minority families. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to pay millions in restitution. Patricia Mills lost her license and faced criminal charges. The police department underwent a complete overhaul of its policies and training. Grace and Amara moved into a better apartment in the same building, renovated specifically for them by James. It had 2 bedrooms, modern kitchen, and windows that overlooked the park where it all started. Grace was offered a position as Community Outreach Director for the foundation, a job that paid 3 times what she had been making at her 3 jobs combined. Most importantly, she now had time to spend with Amara to be present for her daughters' childhood in a way she hadn't been able to before. Amara started a kindness club at her school, teaching other children that helping others wasn't just nice, it was necessary for making the world better. The club grew from 5 members to over 100 within a month. James became a regular visitor to their home. He didn't come as a billionaire benefactor, but as a friend. He helped Amara with her homework, shared dinners at their table, and learned what family really meant. He had spent his life building a business empire, but a 10-year-old girl with a turkey sandwich had taught him that empires meant nothing without humanity. The friendship that developed was genuine and lasting. When Amara graduated from high school as valedictorian, James was there cheering louder than anyone. When she graduated from law school, ready to fight for justice for others, he cried tears of pride. When she argued her first civil rights case before the Supreme Court and won, He knew that the sandwich she had given him all those years ago had changed not just to lives, but thousands years later. When Amara was named as one of Time magazine's People of the Year for her work in civil rights law, she was asked about the moment that started it all. She smiled, thinking of that foggy morning in Jefferson Park. "I was 10 years old, and I saw a hungry man. My mama had taught me that we always have enough to share with someone who has less, so I gave him my sandwich." What happened next? The persecution, the justice, the foundation, all of that came from people either trying to punish kindness or defend it. But at its core, it was just about seeing someone who needed help and helping them. That's what we're supposed to do as humans. She paused, looking directly at the camera. "My mother, Grace Davis, taught me that kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest force in the universe." That sandwich I gave away. It came back to us multiplied beyond measure. Not because the man was secretly rich. That was just circumstance. It came back because kindness creates ripples that become waves, that become tsunamis of change. Every day, we pass people who need help. You don't need to be rich to help them. You just need to see them as human and act accordingly. Margaret Henderson and people like her tried to punish us for showing kindness. They thought their wealth and connections made them powerful. But they learned that nothing is more powerful than a child's pure heart and a mother's fierce love. The Amara Davis's Foundation grew into an international organization, operating in 50 countries and helping millions of families facing discrimination. The Davis method of community intervention became the gold standard for addressing systemic racism and economic inequality. Law schools taught courses on the case, using it as an example of how individual acts of kindness could expose and dismantle systems of oppression. Margaret Henderson, serving her sentence, eventually wrote a letter to Amara, apologizing for her actions and acknowledging the racism that had driven them. Amara wrote back, offering forgiveness and extending an invitation to join the Foundation's rehabilitation program when she was released. Margaret accepted, and her transformation became another chapter in the story of how kindness could change even the hardest hearts. The park where it all happened was renamed Amara Davis Memorial Park, with a bronze plaque that told the story. A community garden was planted there, where people of all backgrounds worked together to grow food that was given free to anyone who needed it. The bench where James had sat was preserved, with a sign that read, "On this bench, a hungry man received more than a sandwich. He received a reminder of humanity. May we all give and receive such gifts." Every morning, people would leave sandwiches on the bench for anyone who might be hungry. It became a tradition, a daily reminder that small acts of kindness could change the world. Grace lived to see her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of whom grew up knowing the story of the sandwich. She taught them, as she had taught Amara, that they always had something to share with those who had less. She passed away at 91, surrounded by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by the Foundation. Her daughter's kindness had created. The last words to Amara were, "Keep sharing your sandwiches, baby. The world is still hungry for kindness." The funeral was attended by thousands, including James Whitfield, now in his 90s, who gave a eulogy about how a turkey sandwich from a 10-year-old girl had saved his soul and changed the course of countless lives. The story of the sandwich became required reading in schools across the country. Children learned that standing up to injustice didn't require superpowers. It just required courage and compassion. They learned that racism and classism were not insurmountable forces, but systems that could be dismantled one act of kindness at a time. They learned that a single person, even a child, could make a difference if they chose love over fear, generosity over greed, and courage over comfort. The Riverside Apartments, once a symbol of division and discrimination, became a model community where people of all backgrounds lived together in harmony. The wealthy residents who had supported Margaret Henderson either moved away in shame or underwent profound transformations, learning to see their neighbors as equals deserving of respect and dignity. James Whitfield, in his final years, gave away most of his fortune to the foundation and other charitable causes. When asked why, he would always tell the same story. A little girl named Amara gave me her sandwich when I had nothing. She also gave me her tooth fairy money, $1 that she had been saving for candy. That dollar is framed in my office, worth more to me than all the billions I've earned, because it represents something money can't buy: the pure, unconditional kindness of a child who saw a human being in need and responded with love. That's the world we should be building. That's the legacy we should be leaving. When James passed away at 95, his will revealed one final surprise. He had left his entire remaining estate to create the Grace and Amara Davis Institute for Social Justice with a mission to teach empathy, fight discrimination, and ensure that no act of kindness would ever be punished again. The Institute's first project was to document and share stories of everyday kindness from around the world, proving that Amara sandwich was not unique, but part of a global human instinct to help one another. The stories poured in by the thousands: children sharing lunches, neighbors helping neighbors, strangers becoming friends through simple acts of generosity. Judge Amara Davis, now in her 50s and a Supreme Court justice, still kept her mother's values at the heart of everything she did. In her chambers, she had 3 things on her desk: a photo of her mother, the original brown paper bag from that morning in the park preserved under glass, and a note she had written as a child that said, "Have a blessed day." Every morning, before court, she would look at these items and remember that justice wasn't just about law. It was about recognizing the humanity in everyone and protecting those who showed kindness in a world that often punished it. Her decisions from the bench reflected this philosophy, consistently protecting the vulnerable and holding the powerful accountable. The story came full circle when Amara's own daughter, Grace, named after her grandmother, gave her lunch to a homeless woman outside their school. When some parents complained, Amara stood before them and told the story of the sandwich. She explained how their attempt to punish kindness would fail, just as it had failed when Margaret Henderson tried it decades ago. The parents, shamed by the story and aware of the legal power behind Amara's words, withdrew their complaints. The homeless woman, it turned out, was a veteran suffering from PTSD. The foundation helped her get housing, medical care, and job training. She eventually became a counselor, helping other veterans, continuing the chain of kindness that had started with a turkey sandwich in a foggy park. The impact of Black Girl Gives Sandwich to Millionaire Dressed as Homeless Man, Next Day, Police Show Up rippled through generations. It became more than just a story. It became a movement, a philosophy, a way of understanding that kindness was not naive but revolutionary. It proved that those who had the least often gave the most, and that true wealth was measured not in bank accounts, but in the willingness to share whatever you had with someone who had less. It showed that racism and classism, while powerful, were ultimately weaker than the human capacity for love and justice. In schools around the world, children learned the story and understood its message, that they had the power to change the world through simple acts of kindness, that standing up to injustice was not just possible, but necessary, and that sometimes the smallest gesture could topple the mightiest systems of oppression. They learned that Amara Davis was not a superhero, but a regular girl who made a choice to be kind, and that they could make the same choice every day. The sandwich had long since been eaten, but its impact continued to nourish souls, inspire courage, and remind humanity of its better angels for generations to come. Because in the end, the story was never really about a sandwich. It was about the choice to see others as human, to act on that recognition with kindness, and to stand firm when the world tried to punish you for it. And that choice, as Amara and Grace had proven, could change everything.